It was April 1964, a typical Friday morning in Mrs. Wilson's first grade class. That day I was sitting in Mrs. Wilson's bottom desk drawer. This is a place where kids sit when they didn't pay attention to the rules and didn't follow directions. In front of the room, Mrs. Wilson heard the intercom ring. She picked it up. She was talking to the principal. And she got off and she turned to me in the back of the room and said, "Mr. Brand, go to the principal's office right now." Well, I got out of my seat in her desk. I walked out the door and I was kind of relieved. I didn't like Mrs. Wilson. She was mean. She wasn't a good teacher. She wasn't inspiring. And as I walked down, I noticed at the end of the hallway was the principal and my mom. I thought, I'm in big trouble now. So when I got there, my mom grabbed my hand, and we walked out of the door and into our car and said to me, "Stephen, today we are going to see the World's Fair. We're going to see the future." Well, I knew nothing about the World's Fair. I knew a lot about the future because every day after school, I watched the Jetsons, and I learned a lot. So as we drove 25 minutes to the parking lot of the World's Fair, we took a long journey from the parking lot to where we got our tickets, and as we were standing there at the front gate, we looked in, and we saw the iconic World's Fair globe. It was awesome. There were thousands of people. There were marching bands. I could smell all the aromas from food from around the world. There was a guy in a spacesuit using a jetpack flying overhead. There were buildings on the left, all shapes and sizes. There were buildings on the right, funny colors, and it was just unbelievable. It was just all sensory experience. We went into the exhibition on the left, and I got to see cars of the future, concept cars, cars that were sleek, fast, all sorts of interesting colors. To the right, we went to an exhibition we could see gadgets and devices and homes that we were going to be living in the future. We actually got to see and use a video phone, which everybody said will never, ever work. Being in that experience, in that environment, inspired me to say, you know, I want to think about the future always. I want to be thinking about the future, how it's going to get there, and who's going to create it. Now, decades later, I got my dream job. I became the opening president of the National Inventors Hall of Fame. And soon after I got there, I got to meet the most interesting people. I got to meet the inventor of sonar and MRIs, and one of my favorites, the inventor of the electric guitar, Les Paul. Their conversations were not like ones I'd ever seen. They were fascinating. They talked about ideas that no one else talked about. The fact that they were from different fields and their interactions came up with new ideas that no one has ever thought about before. I asked about their childhood and where they started, and that inspired me. That moment sparked my curiosity that led to hundreds of interviews with innovators to learn about their childhood inspirations. Now, most innovation researchers study how innovators innovate as adults. I wanted to look at innovators from a wide range of fields as children and come up with ways to inspire and develop innovators of tomorrow based on these inspirations. I hope the following stories can provide insights for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, informal learning professionals, and even teachers. Now, when I ask innovators what inspired them to be who they are today, school experience just doesn't come up. But out-of-school experiences come up. And one of the most common things that came out in these conversations was that these innovators were immersed in a wide range of experiences that created strong memories that continue to shape who they are today. Now, I got a chance to go to the World's Fair, and Day Wilson, she went to Paris. When Day was 5 years old, her father wanted to take her to Paris. He loved Paris and wanted to share with his daughter everything that Paris represented. When she got there, she was surrounded by the aromas and the taste of exquisite French cuisine. One day she went swimming in a pool, and the waterfall was cascading over grapes, and she was smelling the grapes, and it really inspired her. She became a baker at a very young age, and she baked throughout her childhood. Ultimately, she became a professional baker, a food journalist, had her own TV show. She's an author of many books about food, and today she's a food entrepreneur. Then there was Jake Orville. Jake's father was a public defender. Jake's father said to him, "Hey, Jake, come to work. Just hang out all the time. Just come every day." Every day he went to the court. And he hung out and was surrounded by complex ideas and trials. He learned about the law, how people navigated the law. He watched people fail every single day. He watched lawyers get their butts kicked. He watched their clients navigate through struggling for their freedom. They were sweating. It was just an awful experience. They were negotiating for everything. And those very things that he learned in this real-life education allowed him to be who he is today, and he uses it every single day in his work as a biotech entrepreneur. Forrest Bird was another innovator. As a young boy, his father taught him how to fly a plane. His father owned an open-air biplane. And Forrest would sit in his seat, sitting on top of his father's lap, learning how to fly a plane. Well, he did it. He loved going up, and he loved going to the right and going to the left and looking there and having wind go over his body and his face. He was just loving every minute of it. As he went higher and higher, he one day realized that the higher you went, the harder it was to breathe. At some point, he realized, I'm going to invent something that makes this better because I want to keep on going higher. Well, he eventually invented the respirator and helped pilots go higher and higher. And then he invented the ventilator. And with the respirator and the ventilator, he saved so many lives, adults and children alike. Immersions like these, with innovators, and their family mentors by their side, uncover worlds of ideas and knowledge that allows these kids to grab onto what inspires them. They experience things that no other kids experience. They see things that other kids just don't see. Now, immersions that you can create don't have to be in a plane, in Paris, or even in a courtroom. You could splash around on a stream hike, explore a new city, or go to an immersive environment of Home Depot. Not to shop, but to go on a hunt for shapes, colors, materials, tools, all sorts of things, and teach them how to explore deeply and thoughtfully. Look up, look down, look right, look left, hold things in your hands. You could also immerse them in a new place every single month, and if they like it, take them back. Fuel their curiosity and let them build their own vision for the future. Oh, the places they'll go. Now, how does this work in the classroom? David Hawkins, educational theorist, once said, think of curriculum as a way not to cover the required subjects, but to uncover ways to explore, make connections, and create memories of discovery. Let's talk about grades. Now, when I was at the Inventors Hall of Fame, Peter Schultz, one of the inventors in the Hall of Fame, came up to meet with middle school kids. He got up in front of them and said, I nearly failed math in 7th grade. The kids laughed. The parents and the teachers were horrified. He said soon after that, he was in his guidance counselor's office while they were talking about college and said, Peter, you're not college material. Your grades are lousy. You should go to trade school. You'd be great at that. Peter left that office and said, that's not going to happen to me. I'll have nothing of that. Ultimately, he graduated with honors. He went to college. He went to graduate school and eventually became the co-inventor of fiber optics for communications. Then there was Topper Carew, a filmmaker, architect, and innovated throughout his life. One day, he was with his grandfather in a house that was filled with Popular Mechanics magazines, encyclopedia, and tools of all kind. And he turns to his grandfather and said, Grandpa, I want to buy this boat. His grandfather laughed and said, Topper, in our family, we don't buy things, we make them. At that point, they went out, they bought wood, they bought metal, they bought new tools, they brought all that stuff back, and they made the boat that Topper imagined that he would have. When he went to his guidance counselor, preparing to graduate high school, now, by the way, Topper was an amazing learner, and he was an amazing maker, and his grandfather was a great teacher and a mentor. And he was preparing to get out of high school, and he was with his guidance counselor, and his guidance counselor said, hey, Topper, you're not college material. You didn't do well in school, your grades were terrible. You actually cut out of school to go to the movies. You should probably go into the Navy and be a sheet metal worker. You're really good with your hands, and go do that. Well, he wanted none of that. Soon after that, a new guidance counselor came into school, and he said to Topper, Topper, you are a lot smarter than your grades suggest. I think you should go to college. I'm going to help you get there. So the two of them met, and he worked very closely with him, and ultimately he went to Howard University, Yale University, and today is a research fellow at MIT. Now, being a groundbreaking innovator, disruptive innovator, is less about mastering knowledge and much more about mastering the unknown. I was thinking about Peter and Topper, and I said, maybe we should change examinations into imaginations. So think about this. Your daughter comes home and you say, hey, Susie, how was your imagination today? Instead of saying, Susie, how did you do on that physics exam? Now, if we ask children what was and what is, we never get the opportunity for them to imagine what could be. Now, as I developed dozens of programs reaching thousands of children, asking them to design products of the future, I asked them to imagine what could be versus what is and what was. Now, after this happened over and over again, I learned two things. The first thing is when you ask them what could be, what was and what is always emerges to explain how they got to what could be. And more importantly, we noticed that those kids who could imagine what could be were not really good students. They were fidgety, they were bored, they didn't get good grades, they weren't in honor society. But that experience allowed me to talk about those kids and understand them, that experience inspired them, and the grades were not that important. Now, one more thing that came up for me was the one piece that really differentiated them from others is that they took ownership of their own learning. And the big difference between taking ownership and becoming an innovator was not about that, but it's about what their parents do and the adults in their life do, who have them do things and take control to do things that they don't want them to do, but that the kid wants to do. This movement from adult-centered learning to kid-centered learning, which is the key to all of this. And supporting that was that your response to it and how you respond to those personal passion and drive in their own learning. Now, I met Deb Mills-Schofield. Deb was an internet innovator from Bell Labs. She lived in a house that was filled with music and art and science and all things coming together. And they were lucky they lived near New York. And on Tuesdays, it was Free Museums Day in New York. So Deb's mom would take her out of school and take her to museums every week to a different museum. Her favorite was the Guggenheim. So she would go to the Guggenheim, and instead of looking at the labels that most people spend more time than they do in the paintings, they spent time in those paintings. Her mother asked her how to ask questions, how to observe differently, how to observe light, color, perspective, and unique brushstrokes. One day, after this happened for a long time, her mother turned to her and said, hey, Deb, go on your own. You're smart enough, you know how to explore, you know how to ask questions, take off from school and go to museums each week. Now, Deb did that, and she loved it, and she thrived. Now, she was a very deep thinker, and after the artwork, she went to philosophy and esoteric French playwrights. Today, she is at Brown, helping entrepreneurs, artists, engineers, and everybody across the campus to figure out ways that they can imagine the future and make it happen. Dave Durlak, who's an art technologist and entrepreneur, was going to a school that closed unexpectedly. His mom, instead of saying, we'll find another school for you, said, you know, David, you're really smart, you can explore on your own, why don't you just educate yourself? So David went home and created a laboratory classroom in his basement and did all sorts of stuff, took chemicals and put them together and created all sorts of stuff, tested theories. He was doing great and he loved every minute. And when I asked him, tell me about that ownership of the learning that you took on at that point, and David said to me, you know, Stephen, the most important thing when you want to learn deeply, it takes an emotional connection to that learning that he calls staggering. It's not about the cognitive and the knowledge. It's about the emotional connection that he took that allowed him to really understand and take that responsibility of learning on his own and not waiting for someone to teach him how to do it. Now, when they begin, I have a bunch of thoughts about that, taking that ownership. And when they begin to own their own learning, be careful. Because if you redirect them to what you think is a better activity to explore, you could lead them to living your vision and not theirs. Respect where their passion takes them. And if you shut them down, you will kill their spirit. Now, taking ownership unlocks a life of curiosity, making connections that others don't make, and inspiring them that embraces the responsibility of solving today's and tomorrow's problems. In an IBM study, when corporate CEOs are asked what they want from the young employees that they have, one of the top answers is around having employees who are curious and could solve problems, something that seems to be missing from those that they inherit from today's schools. Now, as I went on and asked many more innovators their stories, there are a lot of common themes that came about. These young innovators thrive solving real-world problems. They surrounded themselves with stuff in their rooms and in their basements that fuels their passion and curiosity. They are resilient even when they fail over and over and over again. They were given real responsibility and were trusted. They see things that other kids don't see. They make connections that other kids don't make. Their grades were not important to them. They just wanted to learn and explore. Now, many of them were homeschooled, officially or in their extra time after school. For them, it's about crafting and owning their own learning experiences. These young innovators find their own mentors in parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, friends of the family, and even teachers. One that support their differences and not those that try to coach them into being something they are just not. Now, what is a parent and a teacher to do? Give these kids the time, responsibility, and permission to explore without expected outcomes. Trust them to explore, even if you have no idea what they're talking about. Provide unwavering support to explore on their own terms, but give them the tools to be safe and use values. Don't force them to always clean up their explorations, because you never know what groundbreaking ideas are in the works and need more time to percolate. I got 4 takeaways. 1, immerse them in places that inspire them. 2, don't let grades or other definitions of success define who they are and where they're going. Allow them to take responsibility for their own learning and explorations. And 4, most importantly, don't put them in Mrs. Wilson's bottom desk drawer because they didn't follow directions. That's the innovator's journey. Thank you.